I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay. He's a real estate expert from the wealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Airbnb is getting a lot of attention in Vancouver and other cities. Well, Vancouver, for one thing, says it's hurting the affordable rental market, and they want them to also be charged a business tax. Airbnb running ads on television saying, "We brought $400 million to the Vancouver economy. Please don't crack down on us." What kind of truth is there about the Airbnb business? I know they make big claims about how much they're worth.
Well, I think Airbnb is... It really is a confusing topic for many people, including the politicians themselves, because they don't step back and look at it from a logical standpoint. In other words, when we hear the comments like it's removing rental units from the population and giving it as a hotel room instead. In other words, you're not going to be able to lease this place out for a year, because they're going to treat it as a hotel room. Generally speaking, homeowners who are choosing to do that are not going to lease their rooms out in a B&B type situation for a year. They just don't want to make that kind of commitment. In other words, if they want to leave on their own holidays for a month and they don't want to have someone in their property over the month, then Airbnb allows that option to happen because you simply don't rent it out for the month that you're away. Vice versa, maybe you do want to rent it out for the month when you're away, and that's the only month you want to rent it out, so you rent it out at that period of time. There will be a certain type of investor who is willing to gamble that the vacancies that they would have in vacant nights on Airbnb would be offset by the difference between a long-term rent by the number of nights that they actually have it rented. So let's say they're expecting that they can charge enough having the room rented out 25% of the time that they would get more income than they had it rented out 100% of the time to a long-term tenant. So there are people who would attempt to do that and risk doing that and take on that model. Those people are not that high in numbers. What you're simply seeing here is you're seeing people who are looking to get some extra income from their property. They haven't talked to their accountant. They haven't taken into consideration the CRA, how the CRA may apply capital tax gains on the principal residence once they found it's being used as a form of income. It's just more a neophyte. It's more of someone who's jumping on the bandwagon of this shared economy, so the term is, and they're trying to make some extra money doing that. No different than the taxis and Uber. If you've taken a lot of Ubers, you find generally these guys have full-time jobs doing something else. On their time off, they're looking to make extra money, so they're driving Uber. Is the insurance policy in place in that car that you're getting in? Has that driver been charged with any criminal offenses that you're not aware of? It's just this sharing economy idea running over into residential real estate is really confusing a lot of people. So your municipalities, the claims of, say, $400 million of extra revenue to the city of Vancouver from Airbnb, that is a myth. you would have to look at your hotel vacancy rate, subtract your vacancies against what the revenues were for those properties. You would also have to look at taxation difference. Generally, Airbnb do not tax. I believe you have a hotel tax in Vancouver. So those revenues are all gone. And by the time you compensate for all those things, it's probably a wash. Remember, your municipality does not benefit from income tax. Your municipality does not benefit from capital gains tax. So any dollar that is taken away from your municipality ends up being put back onto the homeowners who are not participating in this type of a venture. So what my answer would be is quite simple. Airbnb is causing the residential property taxes of all the people who own homes in Vancouver to be higher than they need to be. That's the real consequence of Airbnb. The few is harming the many. They are not adding anything. They are not doing anything of a benefit to the greater home ownership community.
The mayor of Vancouver is proposing a new housing deal where new apartment buildings would have to set 20% aside to what would be their rent would be charged according to their income, 30% of income for people who make between $30,000 and $80,000 a year. It would take a couple of years to roll out before you'd see any impact from this at all. Is that a good idea?
Ontario attempted this back in the late 80s, early 90s. And what I can tell you is, from my own city here of Burlington, Ontario, there is still a residual benefit from that decision taking place. Now, what didn't happen is it wasn't being done to encourage rental property. What the mayor is doing out your way, instead of using it as a home ownership tool, in other words, instead of implementing rules that gives people an opportunity to own a home, they're doing it as an investment. They're doing it for rentals. That means that there's going to be an investor involved who's seeking a profit gain. In Ontario, when they did that in the late 80s, early 90s, which for some reason everyone has forgotten in Ontario, there was a component to any subdivision or any development that took place that a certain percentage of the units had to be built so they were affordable to the home buyers. That meant that people in the average and little bit lower income levels were able to purchase properties, and the developers were able to build other properties in the exact same community that were substantially higher priced, or they were properties that were going to be purchased by trade-up buyers. That has benefited the city of Burlington now for 30 years. It was a great plan. It had positive benefits. And what I can tell you is that there are literally thousands of families who have financially benefited from that because they got into the home ownership market. What the mayor is suggesting is actually going to reduce the opportunity of families getting into the property ladder, because he is actually encouraging an investment property to be built. To hit these rental targets that they're going to establish, which is going to be 30% of some set income level, all that means is the units that are going to be built are going to be smaller. You are probably going to see units being built that are as small as maybe 300 square feet, 30 by 10, to meet these targets.
The city does have a minimum, and I think it's higher than that because they won't let them make micro suites.
But that will be the compromise.
Yes.
What I'm telling you is that when a politician puts forward something like this, the developer community pushes back, and that pushback will be strong enough that they're going to get a compromise. Because once a politician says something publicly, they are now accountable to get that idea fulfilled. So that gives the developers power. You see this when you get a housing market correction. So you're already seeing a pushback in British Columbia over foreign buyers tax. You're seeing a pushback over land transfer tax. All of the stakeholders who make their money from the turnover of real estate, they get power when a market slows down. They also get powers when a government wants to accomplish a social goal through housing. The developers then use that power to get compromises from the government. You can watch this over a long period of time when you see how previous standards are changed in building envelopes that cities would allow. In other words, in my city, in Burlington here, prior to the correction of the early 1990s happening, you had to have a minimum 50-foot wide frontage to build a single detached home in the city of Burlington. By 1995, because the city was starving for tax revenue, they relinquished those controls and dropped the lot size down to 32 feet. They also relinquished the width of roads. The use of sidewalks on both sides of the roads became just one side of the road. The park space requirements previously were in place got decreased. The number of schools per subdivision got decreased. All of these compromises were given to the benefit of the developers. And that's where your problem is with this 30% theory for rental affordable housing in Vancouver.
Well, the trade-off, they have said the trade-off will be density.
There you go.
Yeah.
And what does density do? What does density naturally do to any democratic country? Density causes housing prices to go up. This is a misnomer by city planners who have never studied housing markets. If you increase your density, that means you're reducing the size of the average building envelope. Land values skyrocket as density increases. This causes house price affordability to be reduced. Houses become more expensive. Selling prices become more expensive. This is one of the biggest confusions that is out there over a housing stock. People don't have this problem when they understand that if you go to a used car lot and all of a sudden the used car dealer gets rid of a whole bunch of old cars and puts in a whole bunch of new Cadillacs, the average price of a car in that dealership's lot is going to go up. The housing stock is exactly the same. This is why if your house doesn't increase at the real rate of increase, you are actually losing money on your house every year. This has never been studied. I do not believe this exists anywhere else except from my firm, but it is a truth. It is just one of those simple truths about real estate and housing that people don't understand. Density causes house prices to increase.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Ross Kay. Ross, one of the reasons I believe Vancouver is thinking about this idea of the 30% limit on rents based on your income is that right now in the service industry, they can't find enough workers in Vancouver. They did a story about the Thunderbird Drive-In, famous because singer Bryan Adams had his first job there in North Vancouver. They cannot find line cooks. And I'm sure the reason is the salaries that they pay those line cooks are not enough for them to afford to live someplace decent locally.
Yeah, this is the reality of urban living, where urban sprawl cannot compensate for rising house prices. You don't hear a politician in Canada discussing how immigration impacts housing prices. You do not hear this discussion taking place. Look, my roots are immigrants, so I believe in immigration. But when a government is going to bring in 50,000 refugee families, or 50,000 refugees, without first deciding how they're going to increase the size of the housing stock to accommodate those new families, the existing Canadian families are going to find that housing prices go up. And it's not just your tax dollars that people are turning over when immigration levels or the number of immigrants that enter the country are not equal to what the restrictions that are removed for developers to add housing stock. When those things don't align, your existing Canadian families are asked to pay a higher price for their home because of the supply and demand pressures that take place. Vancouver is an extreme example of that. If the city of Vancouver wants to embrace immigrants, if they want to embrace foreign students, if they want to embrace foreign buyers, there's nothing inherently wrong with that in terms of the impact, the financial cost it's going to have to your existing Canadian residents who live in Vancouver. It just means that then you're going to have to compromise in terms of building out your housing stock. These city planners who believe you can add 100,000 people to Vancouver, not tear down any heritage buildings, allow existing homeowners to keep their same home and not have a high-rise built within its boundaries, keep all your park space, keep all your golf courses, keep your road sizes the same width that they are, keep your height of the new buildings that are going to a reasonable level. It's just ludicrous because it's impossible. If you're going to have your city grow in population, the city planners and the politicians must understand they have to let your housing stock grow. Because what happens is that in Vancouver, in British Columbia, it's Vancouver, and in Ontario, it's Toronto, and in Quebec, it is Montreal, and in Alberta, it is Calgary, and to a lesser degree, Edmonton. If you are going to allow people into your province, increasing your population size, though the richest people, the most amount of money that they bring with them into the country or grow while they're living here is going to go to those cities. That is naturally going to make housing prices unaffordable for your existing Canadians. This populist movement that we're watching down in the United States or watching over in Europe, where these immigrant numbers are becoming crazy. I'm watching the numbers on the news on the TV here, Jim, where they're talking about 1,000 refugees were trying to cross the Canadian-U.S. border because of Trump. Okay, 1,000. Okay, multiply that by 12. Okay, now we're at 12,000. It doesn't sound like a big number, but that equates to about 6,000 new housing units that have to be built, just for those people to have a place to stay. This goes back to what you're talking about with your frontline workers, your line cooks, the guys who are making minimum wage. The reality is, minimum wage in Vancouver has to be substantially higher than it is in Kelowna. And politicians are not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But that's the reality of it. Because if you want to have line cooks in Vancouver, and you still want to have affordable meals being served at a restaurant, those people need a place to live at minimum wage. Now, what do you want to do? I know in Banff, they're homeless. There's a CBC article that had a young guy who left New Brunswick, went to Banff. He's working. He's a regular working guy, 22 years old. I think he's a line cook. But he can't find a place to live. Well, of course you can't. How, if you're not going to build spots for these folks, then they're going to have no place to live. You're going to have a kid who is if he lived in Toronto, will be living at home with his parents, be called responsible because he's working in a kitchen, and in Banff they call him homeless. This is the problem that you have in a city like Vancouver, where your housing stock has not been allowed to grow in concert with your population change. There are demographic factors that come into play, but that's the reality of it. And when we're talking about investing in real estate, this is really one of the factors that over a 25-year period you need to look at. It's really a factor that nobody wants to discuss because politicians are in and out in 4 years. The reality is, if you want to have a line cook in Vancouver, either A, you are going to raise the minimum wage in the city, or B, you are going to increase the housing stock so that person has a place that they can afford to live. And it isn't just increase the housing stock, Jim. In other words, rentals are not the solution. Rentals are the solution for about 25% of the population in Canada.
Well, 50% of people in Vancouver rent.
I know, but they don't want to. 75% of Canadians want to own a home. And in all fairness, Jim, if they don't own a home, they are going to be financially damaged over their lifetime because a home, the way that you own a home, naturally builds wealth. It is virtually impossible for someone to rent a home and build wealth. In other words, there may be the outlier. There may be the 5% of the population, 5% of those renting, of those 50% that are renting, there may be 5% of those people who are acting in a manner that allows them to save for their retirement while renting. But the other 95% are not. Whereas homeowners, it's virtually 100%. 100% of the homeowners in Canada, virtually 100%, will be saving for their retirement. That is a reality. Don't think that you are going to socially manage Canadians into doing something that they're not doing now. Simply embrace the reality, the greatness of this country, the greatness of owning the place you call home, and dictate your policy around it. If that means that old heritage building, which we could wait for an earthquake to knock it down, because it's not going to last forever, or that beautiful old oak tree that needs to be cut down, because again, one lightning storm, it's gone. Those are the compromises that you have to make if you're going to allow your city to grow. You have two choices. Either you choose growth, which means increasing your housing stock, and increasing it in a manner that is socially, environmentally, and lifestyle friendly to the people who are going to live there, or you don't. If you believe it's in the best interest of society to have children growing up in places where they can't lie in the ground on a beautiful summer's day and look up at blue sky, that is the choice that you're making. I believe that's the wrong choice. I believe urban sprawl is awesome. You just have to be responsible with how you do it. Certainly in a world where solar power is coming into play, when we're moving off of natural resources, we're moving away from oil, we're moving away from natural gas, we're moving towards solar, wind, hydrogen, whatever's coming down the pike. Urban sprawl is no longer an issue. It's time for politicians to embrace it instead of running from it.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're talking with Ross Kay. Ross, how are condo sales in Vancouver doing?
Okay, condo sales in Vancouver. What you're seeing is that the condo buyer in Vancouver is has to have a higher income level to purchase the condos. This creates one of the illusions that create one of the reasons that we have the illusion of house price gain. The average selling price of these condos is going up because the income level of those buyers that are actually purchasing those condos is higher. There is no other reason. You are also purchasing condos that are of a higher quality this year than you were purchasing last year. In other words, if you're not paying 10 to 15% more for a building that's really worth 10 to 15% more, then prices would be falling, but they're not. This is where you get this illusion of house price gain again, and it's why in a correction this gets worked out. You're right now in Vancouver. I saw somebody said something across my desk here where there's a realtor out there talking about West Vancouver single detached houses dropping 28%, and he had sent a whole bunch of lists of properties where this is taking place, and it was properties that were over $2 million. And then you remember on your show here, we go back to August of last year, and I told everybody, your market has already moved 26 to 28% lower, and you're not going to see it for months to come. Well, you're starting to see it for months to come in West Vancouver in those big luxury detached houses. This is going to roll out across your entire market. Now, whether that's going to take place right now, though, in other words, the people have purchased condos in the last year who have conned by real estate agents that prices are going up, that it's a supply and demand issue, new sales to listings ratio, sales to active listings ratio, all of the metrics they throw at you, which are all BS, you're going to take a big hit. That's just reality. Your market deflated by 28% last fall. Sooner or later, that shows up in real estate stats. You're just not hearing about them now. But believe me, folks, you're going to hear about them. In Ontario, everybody laughed at us last spring when we told them that their housing market was already contracting. We also told them it was going to take you maybe up to a year before real estate stats show it, because that's how long it takes for the contraction to work its way through the market before it shows up months and months later. That's exactly what you've got going on here. You have first-time buyers purchasing condominiums, and because the current condominium owners cannot trade up to a townhouse, really pretty much to a townhouse in Vancouver. There's not enough townhouses for them to move into. They don't want to move up. Don't want to move up. They're waiting to be bribed. Give me another $50,000 for my house, And that would allow me to go over and buy that townhouse that's $100,000 more than I wanted to pay, but I only have to get an extra $50,000 mortgage. That's what happens as a housing bubble starts to deflate. A bubble is already deflating. There is already capital flowing out of a market, which we see in West Vancouver. We have tracked it nonstop since last August. But at the same time that is happening, there is a ratcheting effect across the housing stock, where the lower priced houses, the lower quality houses, continue to see the total lower quality houses, which usually means lower price. They can still be inflating while the market is actually deflating. You also have the contraction bump, which is a natural occurrence in all housing markets, which I'm not going to explain to you here what it means because it's RIP, but we talked about it last week. It's simply a fact. That has also taken place. So you've got all of these factors that are allowing real estate agents to make these false claims that the real estate agents themselves really believe. So the real estate agents really do believe that this is going to keep going on in the condo market, and they're going to use the supply and demand argument. You are going to hear some crazy things. What you're probably going to be hearing somewhere, sometime, is that the actives to sales ratio, there are more sales than there were actives. That's the craziest one you're going to hear. Now, whether or not you're going to hear that or you're going to hear it over the next month or so, I don't know, but you're probably going to find some realtor out there who makes that comment. So I warned you now, that is a ludicrous comment. What it simply means is that they're not doing the calculation the way it's supposed to be done. They're doing it the way the real estate board has told them to do it ever since they got their real estate license. And that illusion is believed by the buyers. So the buyer believes they're purchasing a property, paying these higher prices, and everything's fair and square. As a housing bubble is deflating, and the lower quality houses continue to inflate in price. In other words, the illusion still is happening. The only safety valve you have is an appraiser. You need to have the appraiser and have the appraiser appraise the property at last year's value. If you're purchasing more than last year's value, someone is giving you terribly bad advice. And I'll tell you, it's because they're going to make money. One way or the other, they're making money. Real estate agents have to sell to make money. That's the truth.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been real estate expert Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HoweStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HoweStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com radio is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.